Ticket number 16724, LOPA Printout Development Request. So we've had a request to make some changes to the LOPA printout. This will involve making certain changes to data fields and better formatting the data in certain areas of the report. So if we come to the LOPA module, come down to LOPA worksheet and hit print. The first thing to note is that the orientation of the report has been changed. It's now landscape. For the LOPA worksheet properties, we've removed a few fields: the LOPA reason, the undesirable event, LOPA scope, generic LOPA process, generic LOPA description, and the generic LOPA sheet. For the PHA consequences and risk target, we've redistributed some of the column space to allow for easier reading. For the consequence severity column and the description and TMEL, if there's no data present, we've indicated that within the cell. We've also removed the description of the unmitigated consequences. In the enabling events, we've added the enabling event ID. We've also condensed the row heights on the PFD column. For the initiating causes by modifiers, we've added the unit of measure to the initiating event frequency. We've also removed the summing up of the initiating event frequency row that was at the bottom of this particular table. In the independent protection layers table, we have removed the short description. The initiating cause by barriers table has been renamed to be initiating cause by the IPLs. And we've also removed the initiating cause number. In the initiating causes by conditional modifiers table, we've added the calculations into there. And for the initiating causes by recommendations table, again, we've removed the summing row from along the bottom. Ticket number 16723, HAZOP Printout Report Development Work. So we've had a user request to do some development work on the HAZOP report printout based around changing the orientation and the readability of the report. So if we come to the HAZOP module and we come down to HAZOP study, if we come to the facilitation tab, if we now print the report, if we open the report, the first change is that the report has been changed to landscape. If we then scroll down, the study comments row has been removed from the LOPA study properties. In the HAZOP sessions table, we've removed the comments column. If we come down to this scenarios table, the deviation, cause, likelihood and consequence columns have been made wider for readability. Within the barriers list, we've removed the comments column. We've kept the recommendations and the LOPA columns, but we've removed the facilitator comments and the LOPA worksheet ID. The severity and risk rankings have also been changed. We've changed the orientation from rows to columns for greater readability. Ticket number 16710. Add approval status filter in API endpoints. So the API approval status is not currently a field that can be used as a filter in the API and needs to be added. So if we come to Postman and we come to SLM QA demo and we come down to the object data and we send a request for demand events. If we look at the API policies status, we can see we have finalized, created, finalized, created. There's one for approved here. So we need to be able to filter on this value. If we filter on those that only have a value of created, resubmit the request and filter, we're only pulling back the records that have a value of created. Ticket number 16709, SIFs and availability calculation from bypass activations. So we've discovered an underlying issue with the lack of function availability calculation results. The issue is the CGI event records are not triggering the function tier 3 metric calculation, and this needs to be set to trigger periodically. So if we come to the operate maintain module and we click on a SIF, we have a SIF function that is related to a barrier, to this barrier, and this barrier is linked to this LOPA worksheet. At present, there's no bypass activations for this SIF. If we come to Postman, if we create a CGI event for a bypass activation, we come back to SLM, refresh the SIF. We can see that even though we use the CGI to create a bypass activation, we've created a pending calculation here to alter the tier 3 metrics. If we come to the bypasses template, we can see our bypass in here that we've created. If we then come to the linked LOPA through the barrier and we refresh, We can see that we've also created a pending LOPA calculation from the CGI event. Ticket number 16698, SIF Architecture Printing. So there's currently an issue when the functional diagram is spreading across multiple pages. The diagram is cutting off and you're not seeing the rest of the diagram on the second page. So if we come to Instrumented Systems and we come to a SIF, here's an example of a large functional diagram. So let's now print this template and ensure the diagram is showing in its entirety across multiple pages. If we save and open the report, we can see that the majority of the functional diagram is on the first page and the remainder breaks down onto a second page. Ticket number 16690, Port over Management of Change Report to Chromium Reports. So if we come to the MOC module, we come to the MOC report, we select a site, unit and an MOC ID, we generate the report. If we open the report and have a scroll through, we can see that the report is rendering correctly. Ticket number 16680. The tooltip for HAZOP DRM is not working properly. So when moving the mouse over various cells, the tooltip is opening correctly, but the previously open tooltips are not closing and it's obscuring the view of the matrix. So if we just have a look at the image that's attached, we can see here clearly what the problem is. So if we now come to the HAZOP module and the HAZOP DRM tab, and we hover over various cells, we can see that the previous tooltip is closing correctly. Ticket number 16678, FSA SSRS Final Report format. So we're going to change the orientation of the report from portrait to landscape to accommodate in particular the checklists. So if we come to the FSA module and the FSA SSRS Final Report, we select our site, unit and FSA ID and generate the report. If we open the report and scroll through, we can see that the landscape orientation is a much better layout for the checklists. Ticket number 16672. Sensor hardware fault tolerance. Is this calculated? Well, the answer is yes, it certainly is now. The template has been updated. So if we come across to a SIF and the Performance tab, and we scroll down to Other, we now have the calculated hardware fault tolerance, which is calculated. The logic behind this calculation can be seen on the screen now. And then we have the sensor hardware fault tolerance, which is editable. And we have the final element hardware fault tolerance, which is also editable. Ticket number 16669. Retrieve the number of devices used in the generic model via the API. So if we come to Postman, we come to SLM-QA demo, the data folder, objects and object data. If we're searching for generic model, we'll filter down on one generic model using the hash value and run this. If we then scroll to the bottom, we can see there's a count here for the number of devices used, and in this instance, it's 9. Ticket number 16663. Issue with barrier report. So if a LOPA is linked to multiple HAZOP scenarios, the barrier applied to the LOPA is having difficulty displaying the consequence text in the barrier diagram. So we need to update the barrier diagram to display the consequence value for each HAZOP scenario that the LOPA is linked to. So if we come to this LOPA worksheet we can see we have two HAZOP links in here. The consequences are example consequence 1 and consequence 2343. So if we now come down to the barrier, scroll down to the LOPA barrier diagram. Previously, there would have been no consequences in here, but now we have the two merged together, the consequence 2343 and example consequence 1. Ticket number 16610. LOPA references not being automatically populated. So the LOPA reference fields within a SIF in the printout template are not being automatically populated. So if we come to SLM and we come to this LOPA worksheet and we note the LOPA ID number, the consequence category, severity and consequence. If we then come across to this SIF and we come to the Printout tab, we can see in the LOPA references table we have the LOPA ID, the hazard, the consequence category and severity pulling through automatically. Ticket number 16501, Cause and Effects Matrix Refinements. So we've had a request that in the setup of the matrix to provide a multi-select list for the column headers, which will be inputs, and row headers, which will be outputs, to select which of those show up in the cause and effects matrix. We have a list of column headers here. We have the function type, target RF, target seal, achieved seal, function description, etc. For the row headers, we have P&ID, voting and description. If we click on the Setup tab for the cause and effect matrix, here we can select our function and input fields. So let's leave function type and target RF. Click on Save. And for the final element fields, let's remove voting and description, and we'll just leave the P&ID. Click Save. Let's now come back and refresh the matrix. We can see for the column headers, for the function, we just have the function type and the target RF. And for the row headers, we just have the P&ID. Ticket number 16509, issue with mean time to failure calculations. So it seems that the mean time to failure result in the seal calc table was not converting the result when in continuous demand mode. The value that was being displayed was actually the value in hours, but the unit of measure was displaying in years, which was causing some confusion. So if we come to Instrumented Systems, we come down to a SIF and the Seal Calc Architecture tab, we can see that the demand mode is continuous demand. If we look at the mean time to failure column, we can see that for the custom failure rate, we have a value of 500,000 and a unit of measure of years. Now, previously, we would have been seeing a unit of measure of years, but the value in there would have been 4,380,000,000, which was actually the value in hours. So now we're displaying correctly the value in years with the correct unit of measure. Ticket number 16507. Unable to remove risk category from LOPA. So when customers want to remove analysis of certain risk classification categories, they are currently unable to do so. There is only the option to change the severity of the category. So we need to allow the LOPA severity selection option to be reverted back to blank after it's initially been saved, with the description and TMEL fields also reverting to empty upon saving of the severity field. So if we come to the LOPA module and we come to a LOPA worksheet, if we click Edit and we scroll down to a severity, let's revert this to an empty field now. You'll also notice that the description and the TMEL have been set to blank. Let's click Save. And we can see that those changes have taken effect. The severity, description and TMEL fields are now empty. Ticket number 16408, Cause and Effects Requests Improvements. So we've had a user request to improve the cause and effects matrix by adding a filter option to show the type of function, whether it be interlock or a SIF, to help with the readability and exportation of the matrix, and also to add a cause and effects toggle, either hiding or showing the auxiliary functions. So if we come to Instrumented Systems, we come down to a unit and a cause and effects matrix. We can see here we now have a drop down for interlock or SIF. We currently have one interlock function. We change this to SIF. We can now see the SIF functions. If we scroll across, we're currently not showing the auxiliary functions as per this checkbox. And we have 6 columns of data. If we then click here to show the auxiliary functions, we now have 9 columns of data because we're showing the auxiliary functions as well. Ticket number 16373. User requesting report SIF Design SRS Report SIF ID selection to be a multi-select. So if we come to Instrumented Systems and the SIF Design SRS Report, if we select a site and a unit, we can now multi-select the various SIFs. Let's just select the top 2 and generate the report. If we save and open the report and scroll down, here is the first SIF and here is the second one. Ticket number 16069, adding scope level to cover on all Chromium printout reports. So on the cover sheet of the Chromium printout reports, we've made some alterations to clearly display the scope of the object or objects. So if we come to Instrumented Systems, we come to the SIF Design SRS Report, which is one of the Chromium reports. If we select a SIF and generate the report, if we download the report and open the PDF and compare it to the instance, you can see we're at the Clampit Enterprise level, Beverly Hills Refinery site, 01 gas tab unit, and here is our SIF 001 SIF 123. If we just scroll down in the report, here is our SIF. Ticket number 15897, delete and cascade fixes in project. So when the project doesn't have an approval process and the user tries to delete and cascade the root object that was checked out, the object remains in production. So if we come to the Enterprise Projects module and we come to a project and we come to project settings, we can see that delete requires approval is now set to no. So if we come to Instrumented Systems and we come to Z SIF Sprint, we can see we've got input, output and logic solvers attached. If we check out the object to the demo project, if we now come to that project and the Instrumented Systems module, if we come down to the SIF that's been checked into the demo project, if we come to the admin tools and delete and cascade and confirm, if we now come back to the production instance, we can see that the SIF has been successfully deleted from production. Ticket number 15668, P&ID selecting in HAZOP Facilitation Node table. So we're going to add hyperlinks to the P&ID and the equipment in the HAZOP Facilitation Node table and to the LOPA worksheets in the LOPA module. These hyperlinks are going to open in the global module. So if we come to the LOPA module, if we click on a LOPA worksheet, in the LOPA worksheet properties table, we can see we have the equipment and the P&ID here, and they're all hyperlinked. So if we click on this boiler, we can see it's opening up in the global module. If we open this P&ID hyperlink, that's also opening in the global module. We now come to the HAZOP module. Click on this HAZOP study and come to the Facilitation tab. If we have a look at this node table, we can see the P&ID is hyperlinked, and so is the equipment.